I knew something was wrong the second I smelled cold diesel drifting from my driveway. Morning air in redwood pines usually carried pine sap, damp soil, and the faint sweetness of sun-warmed bark. Diesel didn't belong here. Not at dawn. Not on my land. The scent crept between the trees like a warning, sharp enough to cut through the quiet. I stepped off my porch and heard gravel shift under heavy tires. A metallic clank followed, short, clean, deliberate. Bolt cutters. I'd used enough in my engineering years to know that sound. My pulse steadied, not from fear, but recognition. Something was happening that shouldn't be. The path to my gate curved through a tall stand of ponderosa. As I walked, the morning light slid across the trunks, turning everything amber except one shape near the gate, a tow truck, engine rumbling low. My Jeep Wrangler Tactical Edition was hooked halfway onto its steel cradle. Its rear wheels still touched the ground, but the tension in the chain told me the operator planned to finish the lift. And beside him stood Maggie Thornwell. Clipboard in hand. Chin high. That smug, rehearsed HOA posture that suggested every breath she took was backed by a committee vote. She wore that stiff blue jacket she used for compliance inspections, the one she believed made her look official. Instead, it made her look like an overconfident mall cop. She didn't hear me approach. She was too busy giving orders. "Raise it another foot," she said. The tow operator hesitated. His eyes flicked from the Jeep to a piece of paper Maggie held out. I couldn't read it from where I stood, but I knew it wasn't legitimate. The HOA had no authority over my vehicles. That was written into the original covenants. My grandfather fought for those provisions decades ago, long before Maggie convinced herself she owned the ridge. I stepped from the tree line. "Stop right there." Both of them turned. The operator looked startled. Maggie looked annoyed. "Good morning, Elias," she said, voice dripping with false cheer. "We're addressing a community violation. This vehicle has been reported as abandoned." "My Jeep?" I asked. "Abandoned? It's parked on my own driveway." She tapped her clipboard. "It violates aesthetic harmony guidelines. Non-standard modification. Visible tactical features. Disturbs visual unity." "That clause doesn't apply to private driveways," I said. "We voted on a revision." Her eyes hardened. "You were absent. You can't rewrite property law because I missed a meeting." She exhaled sharply, as if my reasoning inconvenienced her. "Regardless, the board agreed this vehicle must be removed. It sets the wrong tone for the neighborhood." The tow operator glanced at me. "Sir," she said, "it's unauthorized." "She's lying," I cut in. "Unhook it." Maggie stepped closer. "We're following procedure." "No," I said, keeping my tone level, "you're overreaching." Her gaze drifted toward the Jeep's reinforced bumper, the matte black fenders, the discreet antenna cluster on the back. She had no idea what any of it meant. She saw something she couldn't control, and that alone made her want it gone. "You should know," I said quietly, "that Jeep belongs to the Colorado Department of Public Safety. It's an active task force vehicle. I have temporary custody because I'm consulting on a land fraud case." The tow operator froze. Maggie didn't. She laughed. "Please. You expect me to believe you're involved in some state investigation?" I met her stare. "Call the number on the VIN record. Ask." "I don't take instructions from you," she snapped. "Continue the tow." The operator didn't move. I walked past her toward the gate. That's when I saw the chain. Cut clean. The lock severed in two pieces on the ground, still warm from the blades. Fresh scrape marks lined the post. The dirt around the gate bore deep boot impressions. Not mine. Behind the post, something else caught my eye, disturbed soil near my boundary marker. Someone had pulled the rebar stake and hammered it back in at a different angle. A small shift, barely noticeable unless you understood survey patterns. Unfortunately for Maggie, I understood them better than anyone in this neighborhood. I crouched and snapped a photo. Then another. The altered angle meant someone was adjusting the recorded boundary line, an old trick in fraudulent developments. My stomach tightened, not with fear, but clarity. The Jeep wasn't her true target. My land was. Elias, Maggie said sharply behind me, stop interfering. I rose slowly. You cut my gate. We accessed community property, she said. This is my driveway, I replied. My deed shows it. Your deed is outdated. I let that sink in. Outdated. She'd said the quiet part out loud. I turned to the tow operator. If you lift that Jeep another inch, you'll be involved in the unauthorized seizure of state property. His face drained of color. I tapped the hood of the Jeep. The Department of Public Safety will treat this as tampering with evidence. He lowered the lift immediately. Maggie stepped forward, voice strained. You can't do that. I approve this removal. It's within my authority. No, I said. It isn't. She reached toward the tow controls herself. The operator blocked her. Ma'am, he said, I'm not touching this thing. Not after what he said. Her jaw clenched. You're making a mistake. I'm protecting my job, he replied. Maggie spun back toward me. This community has rules. You don't get a free pass because you think you're special. You cut a locked gate, I said. You trespassed. You attempted to seize a government vehicle. You altered boundary markers. None of that falls under community rules. She opened her mouth to argue, but I raised my phone. The camera was already recording. Her expression flickered. You're filming? She asked. I film trespassers, I said. Especially ones with bolt cutters. Color drained from her cheeks, but she recovered fast. You're creating hostility, Elias. I'll be documenting your behavior. Go ahead. She stepped back, flustered. This isn't over. I know, I said. The tow operator unhooked the last chain, muttering apologies as he climbed into his truck. The diesel faded as he rolled down the gravel road, leaving only Maggie standing near the ruined lock. She didn't look victorious anymore. She looked exposed. I walked to the gate, lifted the cut lock halves, and held them up for the camera. Cold steel. Fresh damage. Clear evidence. My grandfather used to say every conflict has a moment when the truth reveals itself, sharp and undeniable. This was that moment. I pocketed the pieces. Then I turned the phone back toward my face. That's when I started recording everything. The harassment began the next morning, subtle at first, then sharp enough to scrape across my patience. I woke to a bright yellow citation taped to my front door. The ink smelled fresh, still tacky around the edges. Unauthorized structure, it read. The structure in question? My grandfather's hand-built shed, standing solid since the 1970s. The shed that predated the HOA by 40 years. At 7:42 a.m., a second notice arrived by email. Noise complaint, filed by an anonymous neighbor. I checked my phone logs. At that exact time, I'd been on a conference call with a design firm in Denver. Video recorded, timestamped. I hadn't even walked outside yet. By 9:15, another message pinged through the HOA app: suspicious activity on Lot 12. My lot. No description. Just a red alert banner and Maggie's signature below it. The pattern wasn't subtle. I walked my property with a calm, steadying breath. The pines rustled softly, branches moving like an old chorus. But the ground didn't lie. Fresh boot prints circled the shed. Different tread than yesterday. Someone had checked the perimeter before dawn. I took photos. At 11:19 a.m., gravel popped under slow-moving tires. I looked up the ridge and saw a white HOA-branded SUV creeping toward my driveway. The engine hummed low, barely above idle. The passenger door opened, and a board member, Paul Denwell, stepped out with a camera slung over his shoulder. I approached him before he reached the gate. What's the purpose of this visit? I asked. Inspection, he said, without eye contact. For what violation? General compliance. That's not a thing, I said. He shifted uneasily. We have concerns about your property boundaries. You don't have jurisdiction to inspect boundaries, I said. He turned, snapped a quick photo of the shed, then one of the ground. We're documenting irregularities. Leave, I said, voice level. We have authority. Not without notice. Not without probable cause. Not on my land. He hesitated, then retreated, shooting one last photo before driving off. The SUV's tires spat a thin line of dust across my boots. I watched until he vanished around the bend. The pressure thickened by mid-afternoon. At 3:05 p.m., Maggie herself drove past in her navy sedan. She didn't stop. She didn't wave. She just slowed to a crawl, lifted a pair of compact binoculars, and stared through her windshield. She studied my Jeep, the cabin's windows, the tree line. As if rehearsing ways to justify more violations. Her car finally rolled downhill, leaving silence behind. I spent the next hour reviewing the digital copy of the HOA's revised rules. Several changes had been added without homeowner approval. Entire sections dealing with vehicle removal, property inspections, and emergency authority appeared in the margins like invasive species. Every alteration matched Maggie's agenda. I mapped the edits. Date stamps led back to meetings that never happened. Signatures from board members who later admitted they hadn't attended. A forged governance trail built piece by piece. Around 5:30, I walked toward the south boundary where the soil had been disturbed the day before. I brought a small trowel and a magnet rod. I knelt and checked the ground again. The new stake angle didn't match natural settling. Someone had hammered it in deliberately, adjusting the line by roughly 14 feet. I scanned further and found faint impressions from a vehicle's tires, narrow tracks from a lightweight utility cart. HOA maintenance used those for trail work. I followed them 10 yards deeper into the ridge. Another marker had been tampered with. That one rested near a fallen pine limb, partly buried, as if someone hoped I wouldn't notice. I photographed everything. While I worked, the evening wind thickened with the scent of sap and cold stone. The quiet helped me think, but it didn't ease the irritation crawling under my skin. This wasn't about a Jeep. This was land manipulation. A deliberate pattern. My phone buzzed at 6:12 p.m. Unknown number. I answered. This is Elias. A familiar voice came through. Officer Radin from the State Task Force. Why was your Jeep logged as impounded? He asked. I stood rigid. Impounded how? We received an automated flag. Someone entered the VIN into a contractor portal. It pinged our system. Someone from my HOA attempted to tow it, I said. That Jeep is part of an active investigation, he replied. Who touched it? The HOA president. A silence followed, then, that's a problem. I know. Secure the vehicle. Document everything. And Elias, don't let them near it again. I hung up and exhaled slowly. The pressure had crossed into a new territory. At 7:04, I received another citation. Failure to maintain vegetation. My yard consisted of natural pine terrain that required no maintenance beyond fire season trimming. They were throwing charges blindly now. At 7:32, a neighborhood forum post appeared from Maggie. Homeowner exhibits aggressive tendencies. Possible legal noncompliance. Board monitoring situation. I stared at the screen. She had started a smear campaign. I stepped outside to clear my head. The sky was peach-colored with the last trace of light sliding across the valley. The ridge held its usual calm, but beneath that calm lay the friction she kept igniting. I walked to the Jeep, checked the perimeter, photographed the remaining tow chain scratches on the gravel. Then I locked the cabin, backed up every file, and formatted a clean archive for safekeeping. But the moment that sealed it came after dark. At 9:18 p.m., Headlights appeared behind me on the winding road. A white SUV. The same one from earlier. It followed closely for a mile, keeping even distance, bright beams punching through my rear window. I turned onto my driveway. The SUV paused at the top of the hill, engine rumbling. After a long second, it reversed slowly and disappeared into the trees. That told me everything I needed to know. By 10:03, I sat at my desk with a stack of photos, recordings, citations, and boundary scans spread across the wood surface. The evidence formed a clear path. Land fraud. Trespass. Abuse of authority. Attempts to seize state property. A pattern too consistent to ignore. I opened my laptop and searched for legal firms specializing in property disputes. One stood out. Hart and Forrester. Clean record. Strong litigation history. Favorable rulings in boundary cases. I called. A calm voice answered. Lisa Hart's office. I need representation, I said. I have documentation of boundary tampering, unauthorized entry, and attempted seizure of a state vehicle. There was a brief pause. Bring everything tomorrow at 9. I'll be there, I said. I ended the call, breathed once through my nose, and organized the files into labeled folders. Each piece of evidence slid into place like a well-settled line on a proper survey map. When I shut the binder, the tension in my chest shifted, not fear, not anger, but purpose. I finally had direction. And that's the day I met the lawyer who changed everything. Lisa Hart looked nothing like the firestorm reputation that preceded her. She greeted me with a calm nod, glasses low on her nose, a legal pad already open. Her office sat on the third floor of a brick building in downtown Colorado Springs, quiet except for the soft hum of old radiators. Sunlight filtered through tall windows, giving the room a warm steadiness that matched her demeanor. Let's see everything, she said. I placed the folders on her desk. Survey scans. Photos. Citations. Boundary markers. Video of the cut lock. The tow attempt. The online posts. Her expression didn't shift, but her posture changed slightly as she began reading, a subtle tilt forward, the sign of someone who recognized a pattern quickly. She started with the citations. These are void on arrival. No basis. No bylaw backing. All issued within 24 hours? Correct, I said. She set them aside. Next, she opened the boundary photos. These are the original markers. From the 70s, I said. I verified placement last year. She compared them to the altered ones. Every difference spoke volumes. She tapped her pen lightly on the desk. This isn't a mistake. Someone manipulated the line. I nodded. I thought so. She scanned the HOA's map changes. This overlay is forged. The metadata alone tells the story. I watched her move through the files with quiet precision. She didn't rush. She didn't react emotionally. She analyzed. Every page she turned seemed to strengthen her view of the case. She reached the Jeep footage and pressed play. Bolt cutters hitting metal. My voice. Maggie's orders. The tow operator's hesitation. When the video ended, Lisa leaned back. She cut your gate. Tried to seize a vehicle registered to the state. And shifted your boundary line. Anything else you haven't told me yet? One more thing, I said. Neighbors mentioned developer activity tied to the Old Ridge expansion. Something from 2009. She raised an eyebrow. That's when the Mills Corporation faced accusations of falsifying plats. Same developer, I said. She exhaled slowly. That explains the edits. She didn't say anything for a moment. She simply regarded the documents like a surgeon planning the next incision. Finally she spoke. This case is bigger than a dispute. It's a fraud chain. Her tone carried a gentle but firm certainty. The kind that signaled a shift in direction, pressure turning into strategy. I felt the tension in my shoulders ease. "Walk me through the timeline," she said. I did. Every detail from the tow attempt to the late-night SUV. She wrote efficiently, each note concise. When I finished, she closed the binder. "All right," she said. "Here's how we move." Her outline unfolded with clear, tactical strokes. First, we file a civil complaint. Trespass. Property damage. Harassment. Bylaw overreach. Second, we request a temporary restraining order against the HOA to stop further citations or access attempts. Third, we notify the state task force. They'll want formal statements about the Jeep. Fourth, we open a deed investigation. If they altered the boundary markers deliberately, that's a criminal referral. I asked, "How strong is this?" She looked at me directly. "Elias, this isn't a defense case. This is an exposure case. The HOA committed acts they can't undo." A quiet satisfaction settled over me. Not relief, but recognition. Finally, someone standing on the other side of the equation. She continued. "Before we file, we need community witnesses. Anyone who saw the tow truck. Anyone who noticed Maggie near your land before the incident." "I know a few who might talk," I said. "Good. Get affidavits. Keep them factual." She slid the binder back toward me. "Tonight, organize everything by date. Chronology matters." I left her office with a new sense of clarity. The mountain air outside felt different, less heavy, more navigable. The city street sounds didn't pull at my nerves the way they have for days. For the first time since the lock was cut, I wasn't reacting. I was planning. Back at the ridge, the evening sun dipped behind the pines, turning the gravel path gold. I walked to the shed and took new measurements with my survey rod. Every recorded number matched the original plats. No shifting from natural settling. Only human interference. I moved along the boundary line, documenting more signs of tampering. A shallow divot where a marker had been removed. Fresh scratches on a metal stake. Footprints in a pattern matching HOA maintenance boots. Not deep enough for heavy weight, someone lean, quick, familiar with shortcuts. Paul or Maggie? Maybe both. I photographed everything. While uploading the files, my phone buzzed. A message from a neighbor, Clara. She'd seen the tow truck the morning of the incident and agreed to provide a statement. Another neighbor, Grant, wrote saying he witnessed Maggie near my boundary earlier in the week taking notes and measuring something. 2 witnesses. Solid. I organized the statements into new folders. Time, date, location. I built a timeline across my screen, modified markers, forged maps, tow attempt, smear posts, nighttime surveillance. The pieces aligned cleanly when displayed without emotion. At 7:12 p.m., I revisited the old metal box my grandfather kept under the cabin floorboard. Inside were the original plats from the 1970s, crisp, clear, signed by the county registrar. I laid them next to the HOA's revised maps. The differences were undeniable. Where the original boundary ran straight through a small granite outcrop, the HOA's map shifted the line south, carving a pocket of land behind my shed. A small adjustment, maybe 40 feet, but enough to benefit someone planning future development. Someone who needed extra acreage. Someone who wanted control of the ridge. As I compared the documents, I remembered something my grandfather used to say while mapping the hillside. "Lines don't lie, boy. People do. Trust the ground, not the signatures." The ground had spoken clearly. I scanned the original plats, stored the digital files, then locked the physical sheets away. With each task completed, the sense of disorder faded. Every new step felt deliberate. Focused. Measured. Night settled across the ridge. The air grew cold and still. The cabin lights cast long shadows through the open blinds, and for once, I didn't feel watched. No SUVs. No slow crawls down the hill. Only silence. I sat at my desk and drafted a concise summary for Lisa, all boundary findings, witness contacts, metadata anomalies in the HOA documents, and evidence of the forged map overlays. At 9:03 p.m., I received a message from her. Good. Tomorrow we file. Short. Direct. Confident. I leaned back in my chair, the tension that had clung to my chest since the toe attempt dissolving into something steadier. Not victory, not yet, but momentum. The kind that builds quietly before the strike. The kind that turns pressure into consequence. I closed the laptop and stood at the window. My Jeep sat parked beneath the pines, its tactical frame reflecting a faint glint of moonlight. Secure. Untouchable. For the first time in days, I felt ahead of the situation. Not in danger. In control. And by the next morning, the lawsuit was public, and so was the video. Courtrooms have their own gravity. Not heavy, not loud, just steady. A kind of pressure that settles on your shoulders the moment you walk in. Judge Morales's courtroom was no different. Sunlight slanted through tall windows, catching dust and thin golden lines. The benches creaked softly under shifting weight. Every sound felt amplified. Lisa Hart walked beside me, collected as ever. Stay calm, she whispered. Facts carry the weight, not emotion. I nodded. Maggie Thornwell sat at the opposite table, stiff-backed, lips pressed thin. She wore a charcoal blazer one size too proud. A pile of papers sat in front of her, but her hands hovered above them like she wasn't sure which ones helped her case and which ones incriminated her. Two board members flanked her, both avoiding eye contact. The clerk announced the case. Judge Morales entered with deliberate steps, silver hair, steady posture, eyes sharp enough to skim a room and categorize every person within seconds. Let's proceed, he said. The HOA's attorney, a man named Brinkley with a polished smile and nervous fingers, opened with a soft defensive tone. Your Honor, my clients acted in good faith to uphold community standards. Any misunderstandings stem from unclear guidelines, not malicious intent. Lisa waited, allowing his words to fall flat before she stood. Your Honor, she said, this case centers around trespass, boundary manipulation, harassment, and the unlawful attempt to seize a state-owned vehicle. The evidence speaks clearly. The judge nodded. Start with the plaintiff's testimony. I took the stand. I spoke plainly, guided by Lisa's questions. Mr. Warren, describe the morning of March 5th. I recounted the diesel smell, the clank of metal, the sight of the tow truck, the cut lock, and Maggie's insistence on removing the Jeep. Every line delivered with calm clarity. No embellishment. No drift from fact. Lisa showed the video. The room stayed silent as the footage played, bolt cutters snapping the lock, Maggie's voice ordering the tow, my steady warning about the Jeep's registration. Even the sound of the cut chain hitting the gravel rang clearly through the speakers. When the video ended, a low murmur rolled through the room. Lisa continued. Mr. Warren, did you grant anyone permission to enter your driveway? No, I said. Did you authorize anyone to move your boundary markers? No. She submitted the photos. The judge leaned forward, examining the altered angles, the disturbed soil, the mismatched metadata on the HOA's revised plats. Brinkley attempted to counter. Your Honor, these images could reflect natural settling or misinterpretation by the homeowner. Lisa immediately responded, we'll address that with expert testimony. Next, she called the HOA treasurer, Mark Odell. He looked nervous, adjusting his tie repeatedly. Lisa approached slowly, building pressure with precision. Mr. Odell, were you present during any meeting where the board voted to authorize vehicle seizures? He hesitated. No formal vote. So no approval? Silence. Lisa repeated, yes or no? No. She continued. Did the board authorize changes to the community plat? He swallowed. Maggie said it was routine maintenance. Was there a vote? No. Were you aware those changes shifted property boundaries? Another pause. His shoulders slumped. Yes. A ripple spread through the room. Maggie shot him a glare sharp enough to cut stone. Lisa stepped back, letting the admission settle. Brinkley tried to recover. Your Honor, the treasurer is mistaken. The president acted within discretionary. The judge raised a hand. Counselor, I'll hear all testimony before deciding. Next came the expert surveyor Lisa had brought in. A calm man named Reeves, with decades of boundary experience. He explained how the HOA's revised maps showed deliberate shifts. These aren't the result of natural drift or measurement error. Someone manually adjusted these stakes. He pointed to markers on the display. See the compaction patterns around the metal pins? Fresh. Hammer marks visible. Soil displaced recently. Brinkley attempted to object, claiming speculation, but the judge overruled him. Then Lisa called a representative from the Colorado Department of Public Safety, Officer Radin. He walked with the quiet authority of someone used to being taken seriously. Lisa began simply. Officer, whose vehicle is shown in this photo? He answered without hesitation. State property. Task Force unit. Was anyone authorized to tow or impound it? No. What's the protocol for unauthorized attempts? Recorded as tampering with investigative equipment. A visible shiver passed through the board members. Lisa kept her tone steady. Did Mr. Warren at any time violate protocol? No, Radin said. He acted within all guidelines. When his testimony ended, Maggie finally took the stand, her confidence cracking at the edges. Brinkley guided her gently. Mrs. Thornwell, why did you order the tow? I believe the vehicle violated our aesthetic rules. Lisa rose for cross-examination. Mrs. Thornwell, show me the bylaw that gives you the authority to remove vehicles from private driveways. Maggie flipped through her packet, pages rustling louder than necessary. It's in the revisions. There is no revision, Lisa said. No vote. No record. No homeowner approval. Maggie's jaw tensed. I acted for community safety. Lisa held up the video still showing Maggie smiling beside the cut lock. Is this what safety looks like? Cutting a homeowner's gate without consent? Maggie snapped, he was uncooperative. Lisa's expression remained unchanged. Is uncooperative a legal basis for trespass? Maggie realized she'd walked into her own trap. Her eyes dropped. Lisa pressed once more. Did you move the boundary markers yourself? No, Maggie said, too quickly. Lisa displayed the HOA maintenance schedule. Your keycard placed you on Mr. Warren's lot the night before the shift. Care to explain that? Maggie froze. The room fell silent. Brinkley rose. Your Honor, we request. The judge raised a hand again. That's enough. He reviewed the evidence for several minutes. Every flip of a page made the room tighter. Finally he folded his hands. Here is my ruling. Everyone leaned forward. First, the HOA had no authority to enter Mr. Warren's property. The tow attempt was unlawful. The use of bolt cutters demonstrates intentional trespass. He looked toward Maggie. Second, the boundary markers were manipulated. That constitutes fraudulent alteration of property lines. He shifted his gaze to the board members. Third, the citations issued to Mr. Warren were baseless and retaliatory. Then he turned back to me. Mr. Warren, your documentation is thorough. Your patience commendable. He banged the gavel lightly. My judgment, full restoration of boundaries, reimbursement of all legal costs, damages paid to Mr. Warren, immediate removal of Mrs. Thornwell as HOA president, and referral of fraudulent plat alterations to the district attorney. I felt the air shift, the kind of shift that comes when truth stops being questioned and becomes accepted fact. Judge Morales added one final line, eyes steady on the room. And let this serve as a reminder to everyone, keep your receipts. They're the difference between allegation and truth. The gravity in the courtroom eased, replaced by something quieter, vindication. After the ruling, Redwood Pines felt different. Not louder. Not triumphant. Just lighter, the way a mountainside feels after a storm clears but before the birds return. The ridge carried a quiet I hadn't heard in months, no slow-crawling SUVs, no clipped phrases from passing board members, no fake smiles masking hidden agendas. The community that once watched the drama from behind curtains now stepped into the open. The morning after the verdict, I found 3 neighbors standing near my gate. Clara, Grant, and old Mr. Hannity, each holding coffee mugs, looking unsure whether to knock or call out. I walked over, still adjusting to the idea that my driveway was mine again. Clara offered a small smile. Just wanted to check in. Make sure you're all right. I'm good, I said. Better than good. Grant shifted awkwardly. People are talking. In a good way. They're glad someone finally pushed back. Mr. Hannity nodded slowly. Took courage, he said. Most of us didn't know how far things had gone. I wasn't used to praise. The months leading up to the lawsuit had taught me to move quietly, document everything, and trust only what I could prove. But hearing their gratitude softened something in me. The fear that the ridge would stay poisoned by suspicion began to fade. The new HOA board called an emergency election within the week. Several homeowners volunteered, people who wanted guidelines, not control. People who understood boundaries, both physical and ethical. For the first time in years, the meeting room felt cooperative instead of combative. I kept my distance but attended each session, observing from a chair near the back. Listening. Watching. Measuring the tone. It wasn't perfect, no community is, but the shift was clear. No hostility. No hidden motives. No power games disguised as compliance. One evening, after a meeting that ran longer than planned, the newly elected president, Rachel Myers, approached me. Elias, she said, this community owes you more than we can say. We'd like your help restoring the old boundary records. Not as a board member, I replied. She shook her head immediately. No. Just as someone who understands this land better than anyone here. We're rebuilding transparency. We need clean maps. Her sincerity was obvious. I agreed. Over the next month, I walked the ridge with a small group of volunteers. We carried survey rods, GPS markers, notebooks, and bright flags for temporary boundaries. We documented every legal stake, compared the old plats to the county GIS system, and realigned markers that had been shifted. The land felt like a living record, one we were preserving instead of exploiting. During one of those walks, we uncovered the original granite outcrop my grandfather marked in the 70s. The rock still bore faint etchings he carved by hand, weathered lines showing distance measurements and compass angles. Seeing it again grounded me in a way I hadn't expected. Rachel crouched beside the stone. Your grandfather mapped this? Every inch, I said. He believed land deserved respect. She touched the edge of the carved markings. Then we'll make sure his work stands. That was the moment the bitterness fully lifted. Not because justice had been served, but because the ridge felt honest again. Meanwhile, the district attorney opened an investigation into Maggie. I didn't celebrate her downfall. That wasn't the point. Accountability isn't revenge. It's closure. And closure arrived in the form of a quiet letter delivered 2 weeks later, informing me that criminal charges for plat manipulation and trespass were moving forward. I folded the letter, placed it in a file, and let it rest there without revisiting it. Life returned to normal in small stages. The Jeep remained parked beside the cabin, sunlight reflecting off its rugged frame. I removed the temporary surveillance setup and returned the spare camera equipment to storage. I no longer felt the need to record every sound outside the window. At night, the silence grew familiar again. Coyotes howled in the distance. The wind rustled through the pines. Branches scraped lightly against the shed roof. Every sound reminded me of the peace this land offered long before conflict arrived. One afternoon, While replacing part of the old fence, I heard footsteps behind me. I turned to see Mr. Hannity holding a wrapped bundle. "Found something," he said. "Thought you might want it." He handed me a photo from decades ago. My grandfather standing beside the ridge, holding a survey pole, smiling proudly at the land he loved. The picture carried the soft tones of aging film, edges slightly curled. I hadn't seen it before. "Thank you," I said quietly. "He'd be proud of you," Hannity said. "You protected what he built." I placed the photo in my pocket and continued working, the weight of it both grounding and comforting. Weeks passed. The community stabilized. New communication channels opened. Instead of citation blasts, the HOA app shared project updates, fire safety reminders, and event notices. People smiled when passing on the trail. Conversations replaced suspicion. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the ridge, casting orange light across the valley, I sat on my porch with a cup of coffee. The Jeep gleamed below, harmless now, just another piece of my life instead of a battleground. The quiet allowed me to think about the long arc of the past months, how quickly tension grows when power is misused, and how easily people can be misled when authority goes unchecked. But also how quickly a community can heal once the truth surfaces. A soft knock interrupted the moment. I opened the door to find Rachel standing there, holding a folder. "Last batch of corrected plats," she said. I took them and scanned the pages. Every line was accurate. Every boundary restored. "Looks good," I said. She smiled. "It's done. Completely done." She turned to leave, then paused. "Thank you again. For everything." After she left, I returned to the porch and looked across the ridge. The land stretched quietly under the fading light, the way it always should have. The kind of peaceful stillness that doesn't demand attention, just appreciation. I thought about the long trail from that morning with the tow truck to the courtroom and back to this quiet moment. The conflict felt distant now, like an old storm cloud that finally moved on. I took a slow breath, letting the calm settle fully this time. Then I looked into the camera, recording one final entry, not out of fear, but as a reminder for anyone listening. Have you ever faced a corrupt HOA or broken system? Tell me your story, and remember, keep your receipts. Peace didn't last long, not because of conflict, but because of truth pushing to the surface faster than anyone expected. A quiet ridge can hide many things, but it can't hide consequences. Not forever. And consequences arrived on a cold morning in late October, when frost coated the pines and the sky held that sharp clarity only mountain air can produce. I was clearing debris near the shed when a county SUV pulled up the hill. Slow, careful, professional. The door opened, and Investigator Rhodes stepped out, a tall man with tired eyes and a coat that looked like it had seen too many winters. "Morning, Mr. Warren," he said. "Morning," I replied. "You hear about the boundary case?" "In part," he said. "We need to talk inside." His tone wasn't urgent, but it carried weight. The kind that belonged to real investigations, not HOA theatrics. I led him to the cabin. He stepped in, brushed frost from his shoulders, and placed a brown folder on the table. "I'll be direct," he said. The district attorney expanded the inquiry. "What started as a boundary issue is turning into a larger fraud case. We need your help." I sat opposite him. "What changed?" "Interviews," he said. "Paper trails. Payments from a developer tied to Mrs. Thornwell. Some go back nearly a decade." I leaned back. "So the ridge wasn't her only target?" "No," he said. "She manipulated records in other parts of Redwood Pines, but your case provided the first concrete evidence." He opened the folder. Inside lay printed text messages, financial ledgers, and scanned documents. Every page connected Maggie to transactions she tried to bury behind HOA authority. Rhodes tapped the first page. "Your video and survey scans gave us the basis to subpoena her digital records." They opened the floodgate. I flipped through the pages. "This goes deep." He nodded. We believe she coordinated with a developer to shift land boundaries, inflate property values, and quietly acquire slivers of land to bundle for resale. Illegal, of course. Your situation exposed the pattern. It was strange hearing it laid out so plainly. I'd suspected pieces of it, but seeing the full picture made the weight of everything settle differently. What do you need from me? I asked. A formal statement, he said. Detailed. Chronological. Including anything you left out of your civil testimony. I agreed. We spent 2 hours going through every moment from the cut lock to the courtroom. Rhodes listened without interrupting, occasionally pausing to clarify dates or repeat key admissions from Maggie. When we finished, he closed the file with a worn sigh. Thank you. This helps more than you know. He stood, ready to leave, then paused at the door. One more thing. You might get contacted by defense counsel. They'll try to minimize your involvement. If that happens, call me directly. I will, I said. When the SUV disappeared behind the trees, the ridge felt heavy again, but not with dread. With responsibility. The truth had grown larger than my property line. It had become part of a case that touched the whole community. That evening, I walked the perimeter again. The markers stood where they belonged, steady, straight, restored. I checked each one, running my hand along the cold metal, grounding myself in the fact that something had finally been set right. But justice rarely moves in a straight line. The following week, I received a letter from Maggie's attorney, a thinly veiled attempt to intimidate. Your actions may have contributed to reputational harm, it said. Hollow words. Empty threats. I forwarded it to Lisa. She called within minutes. Ignore it, she said. She's grasping. How bad is it for her? I asked. Lisa paused. The DA is considering multiple felony counts. She's scared, and scared people write foolish letters. I exhaled slowly. So this isn't over for her. It's the beginning, she said. I set the phone down and stepped outside. The sun dipped behind the pine line, turning the valley orange. Peace has a different taste after conflict, sharper, more deliberate. You don't take it for granted. 3 days later, the new HOA board held a community barbecue. A simple event, burgers, fire pits, children playing near the open field. I went, partly out of curiosity, partly to confirm that the community wasn't slipping back into old habits. When I arrived, people nodded, waved, even thanked me quietly. Some apologized for not speaking up sooner. I didn't need apologies. Fear can silence entire groups. What mattered was the shift happening in real time. Rachel approached with a clipboard. We'd love your input on the new land use transparency policy. I laughed softly. You're still fixing things. We'll be fixing for a while, she said. But at least we're doing it openly. I reviewed the draft. Clean rules. Clear boundaries. No loopholes. No power traps. I marked a few suggestions and handed it back. Rachel smiled. You know, after everything, you could run for the board if you wanted. No, I said. I prefer helping from the outside. She nodded, understanding. Some roles are meant for temporary battles, not long-term seats. Later that night, as the crowd thinned and the fire pits dimmed, I sat with Clara and Grant on a wooden bench overlooking the valley. The air held a crisp edge, and sparks floated gently upward before fading into the dark. Grant took a slow breath. Feels like the community's waking up. It is, I said. Clara added, you gave everyone a reason to look closer. That matters. I didn't respond immediately. I watched the tree line instead, the quiet movement of branches, the ridge recovering from what had been done to it. Eventually, I spoke. Truth doesn't fix itself. Someone has to push it forward. Clara smiled. You did. When the last few neighbors drifted home, I walked back toward my cabin. Moonlight washed over the Jeep, casting long shadows across the gravel. A symbol of the fight, but also of the resolve that carried me through it. Inside, I placed the original plats, my grandfather's drawings, back into the metal box. I added one more item, a printed copy of the court ruling, folded neatly beside the old maps. Past and present, side by side. The ridge will outlive all of us. But the lines we protect shape what we leave behind. Weeks later, Rhodes called with a final update. Charges are filed, he said. She'll face trial. I thanked him. Not out of triumph, but closure. After the call, I stepped outside again, feeling the cold mountain wind against my face. The land felt steady, grounded, whole. Then, in one clear moment, I realized the true legacy of the fight. The ridge wasn't just protected, it was understood again. By the neighbors. By the board. By the people who once looked away. The truth had become part of the soil. And as I recorded my final entry for the story, I ended the same way I always do when justice finally lands where it belongs. Have you ever faced a corrupt HOA or broken system? Tell me your story, and remember, keep your receipts.